I'm sure that many of you may have watched the Zoom from Compass on Monday, which had Martin Forde talking about the Forde Report. I'm just going to play a short clip of that Zoom.
And in fact, it was Lord Whitty who first expressed some disquiet about the process of proscription, which I know has become a real factional issue. And he, like I, as a lawyer, was concerned about any retrospective application of that. And by that, I mean, let us say I'd been to a Labour Against the Witch Hunt meeting before it was a proscribed organisation, and it later became proscribed. And I can't really speak about the political merits of that. It just seemed to us to be concerning that if you'd attended such a meeting or expressed support in social media prior to the organisation being proscribed, that your historical interaction could be used as a current basis for expulsion. And that was something we were concerned about. Now, as I said, I'm not a politician, and there may be very good political reasons for having that system.
Now, I found his response to the idea of retrospective prescriptions a bit wishy-washy, because he said he had concern about it. I just thought, what's that? And why can't you actually say anything more than that? So I emailed him and expressed my disgust at the way people like Andrea Gilbert and Pamela Fitzpatrick have been treated. I was surprised to get a reply almost straight away from Martin Forde, and this is what he wrote in his reply. I note, dear Crispin, I note your frustration. I do feel that retrospective punishment is a breach of natural justice. And then he goes on, but as I explained, the party's right. Anyway, the thing is, he doesn't say that he can do anything about it, but he has in this email said that I do feel that retrospective punishment is a breach of natural justice. And for me, that's a significant thing to have said, because if he's saying that the party does not have natural justice, then obviously that doesn't look good on the party. So I wanted to find out what Pamela Fitzpatrick has to say about this, because she's one of those people who has been retrospectively punished. How are you doing, Pamela?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Crispin. Trying to adjust to the time difference. The losing the hour is a bit difficult, but anyway.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to have you on early. I should have waited an hour or so.
That's good. It's fine.
I was just thinking, you know, maybe he can't do anything with this report. Maybe he has no power to actually make any changes. And it doesn't seem like the party's making many changes anyway. Mm. But the fact that he said it's against natural justice, surely that should be something that we can work with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, natural justice has a kind of legal technical term really that he's talking about, and it's just procedural fairness. And procedural fairness are things like knowing the case against you, transparency, being able to participate in the process, no bias on those who are judging you, all these kind of normal things. And it's not unusual. You would expect it in any kind of disciplinary process. And the problem is that I think what Martin Forde is saying is that, yes, he thinks this, but where do you go with it? What do you do? Now, in order to enforce that, you need to take legal action to get a court to actually decide that that is the case, that they are bound by the principles of natural justice. And the problem is that it's very costly to go to court. Now, I think, as you know, I have engaged solicitors, and we're in that process of arguing that they are bound by the principles of natural justice. And the party has just responded to me. Now, I don't want to go into the detail of what the legal arguments are there, because my solicitors have asked me not to, but that is how it will be determined in the end. And it's, I have to say, I've had 20 years of representing people at upper tribunals where there's an error of law in a lower level tribunal decision. And one of the things you look at is whether there's a procedural error, where there's a breach of natural justice. So I'm very familiar with this. And most people working in either the civil or criminal justice system would be very familiar. And the idea of having retrospective rules or legislation is completely abhorrent to anybody who works in those processes. So I can see what Forde is saying, but what do you do? And we're all focusing on what Martin Forde is saying and what he can do and laying some responsibility on him. But remember, there were 3 other people on that panel. The Forde investigation not only had Forde, but it had 3 Labour peers on it. So those Labour peers, what are they doing to challenge what is going on and what they recognise is going on in their party? And they do have power. They're in senior positions in the Labour Party. So I'll stop for now. Do you want to...
No, I think that's an interesting thing. So do you think we should write to them and ask them for their comments on there not being natural justice and in that retrospective prescriptions?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Ruth Lister has worked at some of the same organisations I have. I've worked with her on publications. I know that she's very aware of what it means. Equally, Larry Whitty, Debbie Wilcox, all of them must be fully aware and have seen the evidence. And what I found the meeting quite upsetting, actually. I don't know if other people did. There was 1,500 people on that meeting, 1,500 people and more who've been treated in a similar way to I've been treated. And it's not a surprise, you know, this thing that Labour don't abide by the rules of natural justice, because they've written it into the rule book that they don't have to do that. Now, part of the problem is that the Labour are relying on 2 things. The first, as Martin Forde says, that it's not a public body, and public bodies are kind of held to a higher account, I guess, than what Labour are, which is a club, like a private club. And what Martin Forde said at the meeting was those rules about kind of clubs go back to the days where we had gentlemen's clubs. And of course, they wanted to keep out the riffraff. So they don't want to change that. They don't want, you know, these lefties going into their men's clubs, I guess. But surely there must be a different approach for the main political parties, because they are, as Starmer keeps telling us, a government in waiting. And what many people are starting to say is if he thinks that this is an appropriate way to behave to its own members, what is he going to do when in government? And it's a really scary time, because we've got, you know, a real economic crisis. We've got the rise of the far right. We've got people protesting outside hotels where asylum seekers are. We've got the government trying to introduce laws which they admit themselves don't abide by their duties under human rights legislation. So in that context, if you get a Labour government with no money, this kind of racism rising, what are they going to do? So, you know, Forde sets out recommendations in the report, and I just reminded myself again of them this morning. And they are the things that you would consider a norm in, say, a benefits tribunal or an employment tribunal, that you know the case against you, that you get the opportunity to question the witnesses, that you're able to put forward your kind of case, really. And he says you should be given, you know, 28 days before a hearing. Now, in Labour, what they've told me is that my appeal will not take place. I don't know when, I don't know who will be on that appeal panel, and I will be notified of the outcome. I mean, it is Kafkaesque. It is completely astonishing. One of the other things that Forde says is there should be mitigations and proportionality and consistency. So when you see that people have been expelled for things like liking a tweet by the SNP or the Greens, and they're expelled, but then on the other hand, you have people who have formed another political party and stood against the Labour Party, welcome back. There is no consistency. There is no proportionality.
Yeah, well, but we're going to have to keep looking at this again. So we'll come back on this issue. But I do think that it was a bit of progress that he wasn't just saying it's a concern, that he actually said that it goes against natural justice. And it's no surprise that the media have made no noise about this at all. So we've got to try and amplify it through our own social media and stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on, Pamela. Sorry to get you up early with the clock changing. Thanks.
Okay.